Hi guys, Mike here again. In this video, I'm going to review Xingqiu's elemental skill, Guhua, Sword, Fatal, Rainscreen. So let's get right into it. So on my screen, you see I have criteria, and I'm gonna grade each one on a 5-star scale. So let's get right into it. The first one is Burst. Burst is just how fast the skill comes out. So as you can see, it's pretty fast. Honestly, I think it's one of the fastest in the game. So for that, I have to give it 5 stars. That's easily a 5-star rating. All right, let's go into AoE, or area of effect. So I'll try to get a side view here so you can see more. It's not that big, but it's bigger than a normal attack, right? And let's check a charge attack. So it's kind of the size of a charge attack. I mean, if we say 1 star is something like Xingqiu, like that, and you could argue, well, it's kind of the same. I don't know, it's hard to tell. It's either 1 star or 2 star. It's quite wide as well. I'm gonna give it 2 stars. All right, the next one is Elemental Sustain, and I just defined this as how long any elemental effects stay on the screen when you activate the skill. So you can see there's no elemental sustain. It's just when he attacks, that's all that elemental effect is there. There's no lingering effect like with Xiangling. The fire is lingering. Well, granted there's grass there, but at least the panda can keep blowing fire. But Xingqiu, it's just there's absolutely no lingering or elemental sustain. So I'm gonna have to give that 1 star. All right, next is number of hit events. This should be pretty simple. It's just 2, 1, 2. Wide swing with a upward swing. So I'm gonna give that 1 star. And remember, these ratings are compared against other elemental skills from other characters. So out of all the elemental skills of all the characters in the game, 1 star means they're the worst or the lowest tier for those elemental skills, while a 5-star means out of all the elemental skills for all the characters, it's probably the best. So let's look at cooldown. Cooldown is 21 seconds, which is quite long. I'm gonna give that 2 stars. The only reason I wouldn't give it 1 star is because I think Chi-Chi's skill is longer, so that would warrant a 1-star rating. But 21 seconds is still pretty long in my opinion. There's one thing I like to do is equip the sacrificial sword, so I will show that. So this is a 4-star weapon, and you can see over here the skill has a 40% chance to end its own cooldown. That's actually pretty useful. I've used it in the Abyss. It's pretty handy. You just have to make sure you're watching out for it. So when I use this skill, I'm always staring at the bottom right hand corner to check if that skill activated or that weapon effect activated. It's definitely handy. So next is hit damage. Hit damage is just the raw amount of damage that the skill does. And this is normalized against talent level ups. So, you know, if everybody's skill was on an even playing field as it concerns talent level ups, I would put this at a 4 stars. Because at talent level 4, each hit does around 210 to 235 damage. When I was comparing that to other skills from other characters, that was pretty high. Someone like Venti, his elemental skill does around 300% attack, and if you hold Venti's skill, it's 400. Xingqiu's skill is around 210, which is much higher than a lot of other characters. So for that, I'm gonna have to give him 4 stars. I can see someone giving him 3 stars, but for me, I'm gonna put 4 stars. It's definitely not 5 stars because someone like Venti's skill would take that place because it's just much higher than everyone else's. All right, so next is utility. So the main utility of this skill is 25% defense increase, and it's pretty useful. So I think it's pretty straightforward. So it does 2 things. It reduces the amount of damage taken, and it also increases your resistance to interruption. So that's kind of like a hyper armor effect. And that's the rain swords revolving around Xingqiu. And you can see I have 4 rain swords. That's because I have a constellation that increases the number of rain swords by 1. But if you have no constellations, he's just gonna have 3 rain swords. So the next is hit rate and accuracy. And for this skill, I have to give it 5 stars because its burst is so high. And even though its AoE is not that good, because it has such a high burst, all it takes is just running up to the enemy and pressing the button. And that's really easy to do. So this is a situation where, because the burst is just so fantastic, its hit rate follows that and it gets a good 5-star rating. All right, so the next point is energy generation. Energy generation is just how well the skill can generate energy for your character. So let's go in game and check it out. So his energy generation is very interesting, and I'll show you why. So when I hit a unit, it's going to generate 5 orbs. Right there, you can see 5 orbs. And that's actually quite a lot. For someone like Veinti, he only generates 3 orbs. But you have to keep in mind the cooldown, right? Because Veinti's cooldown for the skill is, I believe it's only 6 seconds. But Xingqiu, his cooldown is much worse. So even though he gets 5 orbs, 5 water orbs. Oh. So my weapon triggered and that eliminated the cooldown. So let's just do it again. As you can see, 5 orbs and 21 seconds cooldown. So the reason they made a large cooldown for this skill is because this skill has the defensive buff and the hyper armor buff, and they need that to last a decent amount of time. So that's why if that effect lasts a decent amount of time, by that logic they have to increase the cooldown rate. So but if they increase the cooldown rate, then they have to kind of compensate the energy generation factor, because they're not going to give it 1 or 2 orbs of energy generation. That would be just so inefficient, especially considering Xingqiu's burst skill requires 80 energy. So yeah, if you really combine that with the weapon that eliminates cooldown, then you can potentially get a lot of energy, especially if you pair Xingqiu with another water character. You could just, so pretend like Xiangling's a water character, you have Xingqiu, you hit them with the hydro swords and you switch to your other water character, and then they get those 5 water orbs, and that's going to be a lot of energy generation. And then even if you want to slap artifacts that promote energy generation, that's a lot of energy, or a lot of potential energy. But you need that weapon. You definitely need that weapon that eliminates cooldown, which is the sacrificial sword. When it's all said and done, I'm gonna have to give energy generation a rating of 2 stars though, just because we can't assume that you have the sacrificial sword. So, and this is mainly because the cooldown is so long, but that 5 orbs definitely has potential for certain builds, I would say. All right, so the next criteria is damage output, or DPS. For this, I'm gonna have to give him 1 star. For this, I'm gonna have to give him 1 star. And that's because the cooldown is just so long. Even though the hit damage is pretty good, you're not gonna be seeing this skill active as much as you'd like. I can see someone giving it 2 stars just because the hit damage is pretty good. Because this skill is trying to have that defensive utility, it's kind of sacrificing the damage output, and that's why I give it 1 star. All right, next is elemental reaction triggering. For elemental reaction triggering, I would give it 4 stars because the burst is just so high, it's very reliable. And even though the AoE is quite small, because the burst is so high, it's really easy to get that elemental reaction triggering. So for a final rating, I would give this skill 3 stars. The reason I give it 3 stars is because it has a lot of it's a super interesting skill. I actually really like it. Even though 3 stars seems like average, I actually really like this skill. And I think it has a lot of potential depending on your build and what artifacts and what weapon you put on Xingqiu. Because you could try to you could try to make this skill lean more towards damage by putting a weapon or artifacts that boost damage, or you could try to promote that energy generation with that sacrificial sword that eliminates the cooldown with artifacts that can boost your energy generation, and then adding another water character, because remember he gets those 5 orbs, energy orbs, every time he uses the skill. So yeah, he's like, he can do many things. And I really like characters that are master of none, because they have that flexibility. I know a lot of people just like DPS and just raw damage and stuff, but I think the game is a little bit more interesting when there's these really wonky characters, or not wonky, but just super interesting characters like Xingqiu. So yeah, I would give 3 stars. I can see maybe a 4-star rating. Someone might really like him and give him a 4-star rating. I can also see someone giving him 2 stars. They just hate Xingqiu and they hate everything about this skill. So, but remember, this rating is just for the skill, his elemental skill, which is Fatal Rainscreen. And that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe for more videos like this. I'm going to do Sucrose next. I also want to do Bennett. Bennett is interesting. Bennett and Sucrose I definitely want to do, because they're 4-star characters and they're pretty interesting. So that's pretty much it, guys, and I'll see you next time.